Watch an avoidant perform love, and you'll see all the right moves. They say the words, they make the gestures, they show up for the big moments, remember the anniversaries, buy the gifts. They know the script, know what love is supposed to look like from the outside, and they can execute the performance well enough that you believe it, at least initially. You think they love you because they're doing the things that people who love do. But attachment, that's different. Attachment is involuntary. Attachment happens in the body, not in the performance. Attachment is the obsessive thinking they can't stop, the physical ache when you're not there, the jealousy they can't control when someone else shows interest in you, the way they track your life even when they're creating distance, the panic they feel when you actually start to leave. Attachment is what's happening underneath the performance or the lack of performance. And here's what breaks the avoidance' entire defensive structure. They can fake love, but they can't fake not being attached. They can pretend they don't love you. They can't pretend they don't need you. The need is there whether they admit it or not, whether they show it or not, whether they want it or not. The avoidant is attached to you, deeply, painfully, in ways that terrify them. While they're performing indifference, while they're creating distance, while they're acting like you don't matter, their attachment system is screaming. You're the person they think about constantly. You're the one they compare everyone to. You're the standard they measure every future person against. You're the loss they'll carry for years. The attachment is real and it's strong. And it's exactly why they're running, why they're defended, why they can't show up the way you need them to show up. And you shouldn't care, not because the attachment isn't real, but because attachment without capacity is attachment that can't create relationship, can't meet your needs, can't build the partnership you deserve. They're attached to you while being completely incapable of being with you in healthy ways. The attachment is their problem to manage, their pain to sit with, their reality to face. It's not your responsibility to stay because they're attached. It's not your job to sacrifice your needs because somewhere underneath their defended exterior, they need you desperately. Their attachment is real. Your boundaries are more important. The specific ways their attachment reveals itself despite their performance of not caring. They can't completely disappear. The avoidant who isn't attached can cut you off entirely, can walk away without looking back, can move on without residual contact. But the avoidant who's attached to you, they linger. They keep some thread of connection even when they've created massive distance. They watch your social media. They ask mutual friends about you. They stay geographically close. They maintain awareness of your life even when they're not part of your life. The lingering is evidence of attachment they're trying to hide. If they truly didn't care, truly weren't attached, they could make a clean break. But they can't. Some part of them needs to know you're still there, still accessible, still in their orbit even if they're keeping you at distance. They react when you move on or when someone else shows interest in you. The reaction is immediate, visceral, impossible to completely hide. Maybe they don't say anything directly, but you can see it in their face, in their energy, in the sudden increase in contact after a period of distance. The reaction is attachment asserting itself despite their defended state. They're attached enough that the thought of losing you to someone else creates panic, creates jealousy, creates desperate need to know they still have access to you, even if they're not using that access. The reaction proves the attachment because you don't react to losing someone you're not attached to. Indifference doesn't create jealousy, but attachment does. They remember everything about you in ways that reveal you occupy significant mental space. Avoidant who isn't attached forgets, moves on, doesn't retain detailed memory of someone who doesn't matter. But the avoidant who's attached remembers what you said in passing 6 months ago, remembers your preferences, your stories, your specific way of being. The remembering is evidence of attention, and attention is evidence of attachment. You can't pay close enough attention to remember everything about someone unless that someone is constantly on your mind. The detailed memory is their attachment showing through the cracks of their performance of not caring. They compare everyone to you, and everyone falls short. New person doesn't laugh like you, doesn't understand them like you did, doesn't create the same ease or comfort or connection. The comparison is involuntary, is happening despite their attempts to move on, is proof that you're still the standard their attachment system is oriented toward. Attached people compare. Unattached people don't. If they truly weren't attached to you, new people would be evaluated on their own merits. But new people are being evaluated against you, and the evaluating against you is the attachment refusing to let them move on, no matter how much their defended state wants to move on. Why they're more attached than they ever showed while you were there. The avoidance attachment to you was happening the entire time. They just couldn't show it. Couldn't admit it to themselves, definitely couldn't express it to you. Showing attachment would mean admitting need, and admitting need would make them vulnerable. And vulnerability is what their entire defensive structure is designed to prevent. So they hid the attachment, performed casual interest while feeling intense attachment, acted like you were optional while you were becoming necessary, maintained cool distance while internally you were mattering more than anyone had ever mattered. The hiding was strategic self-protection, but it was also a lie they told you and themselves. The lie was, I'm not that attached, you're not that important, I could take you or leave you. The truth their body knew even when their mind denied it was, I'm desperately attached, you're critically important, losing you would devastate me. The gap between the lie they performed and the truth they felt is the entire tragedy of the avoidant attachment. They destroy relationships with people they're intensely attached to because the attachment itself is what triggers their fear, and the fear is what triggers the defensive distancing that makes you leave. Their attachment also intensifies after you're gone in ways it never could while you were there. While you were present, your availability let them take you for granted. You were there, so the attachment didn't create urgency. But once you're gone, once you're actually unavailable, the attachment activates fully. Now they feel the full weight of needing you while not having access to you. Now they experience the attachment without the defense of your availability, making the attachment feel less threatening. The absence makes the attachment undeniable. They're more attached now than they were when they had you, because now the attachment includes the loss, includes the knowing that they destroyed their access to the person they're attached to, includes the permanent ache of wanting what they can't have. The psychological mechanism that makes attachment involuntary but love performable. Love is interpretable. You can tell yourself what your feeling is or isn't love based on how you want to interpret the feeling. You can minimize it, can convince yourself it's just temporary attraction or convenient companionship or casual enjoyment of someone's company. Love requires you to name what you're feeling as love, and the naming is something the avoidant can control through how they interpret and label their internal experience. But attachment happens below the level of interpretation. Attachment is biological, is nervous system level. Is your body recognizing someone as important to your well-being, whether you want them to be important or not? The avoidant can tell themselves they don't love you. They can't tell their nervous system not to react to you, not to track you, not to create anxiety when you're absent or unavailable. The body doesn't lie. The body attaches to people who matter, and the attaching happens automatically without requiring the mind's permission or interpretation. Attachment is also revealed through what you can't control, rather than through what you choose to do. The avoidant can control whether they say, I love you. They can't control whether they think about you obsessively, can control whether they make plans with you, can't control whether they feel physical ache when you're gone, can control their behavior toward you, can't control their internal state about you. All the things they can't control, the involuntary responses, the automatic reactions, the uncontrollable thoughts, these are the attachment revealing itself despite their attempts to hide it or deny it. The performance of love also requires audience. You can only perform love when the person you're performing it for is there to receive the performance. But attachment exists whether you're present or absent. The avoidant can stop performing love the moment you leave the room. They can't stop being attached the moment you leave. The attachment continues in your absence, continues in their private moments, continues in ways you never see because it's not performance that requires audience. It's internal reality that exists regardless of who's watching. Why their attachment to you will probably last longer than healthy love would last. Healthy love that ends has opportunity to process, to grieve, to integrate the loss and move forward. The person loved, the relationship ended, they feel the pain, they work through it, eventually they let go and they move on. The moving on is possible because healthy people can acknowledge what they lost, can complete the grief cycle that allows closure. But the avoidant can't do this with their attachment to you. They can't acknowledge what they lost, because acknowledging it would mean admitting how much you mattered, how attached they were, how devastating the loss is. Can't feel the feelings about the loss because feeling deeply is what they've defended against their whole life. Can't complete grief cycle because completing it requires vulnerability they don't have access to. So the attachment just sits there, unprocessed, ungrieved, unresolved. And unresolved attachment doesn't fade the way processed grief fades. It just continues, indefinitely, keeping them attached to you years after a healthy person would have moved on. The attachment also lasts because it's mixed with regret and shame about how they treated you. They're not just attached to you as person they loved and lost. They're attached to you as evidence of their own failure, their own damage, their own incapacity to love someone who deserved love. Every time they think about you, which is often, they're not just missing you, they're confronting their shame about destroying the relationship. The shame reinforces the attachment because the shame keeps them thinking about you, keeps you present in their mind as person they wronged, keeps the attachment active through the psychological loop of I'm attached to them and I destroyed it, and I'm attached to them and I destroyed it, repeating endlessly without resolution. Their attachment lasts because you become the one who got away, and the one who got away occupies permanent place in the avoidance psychology. Not the person they were actually with, but idealized version of you created by distance and loss and regret. They're attached to memory of you, to idea of you, to the relationship they could have had with you if they'd been different. The attachment to the idea often outlasts attachment to reality, because idea is perfect in ways reality never is. They can be attached to idea of you forever, because the idea never disappoints them, never requires them to be vulnerable, never triggers their fear. The attachment to idealized you is safe attachment, and safe attachment is the only kind they can sustain, which is why it lasts. The proof that their attachment exists in what they do when they think you might move on. The avoidant maintaining distance suddenly breaks the distance the moment they think you might be seriously involved with someone else. The breaking of distance is panic response, is attachment system overriding the defended state, is their body refusing to let them lose you without attempting to prevent the loss. If they weren't attached, your moving on would be irrelevant. But they're attached, so your moving on creates crisis that forces them to act despite their fear, despite their defended state, despite their usual pattern of maintaining distance. They reach out with urgency that wasn't present when you were available. When you were there, when you were trying to connect with them, they could be casual, could be distant, could take days to respond to messages. But when you're moving on, suddenly they're responsive. Suddenly they're initiating. Suddenly they have time and energy and availability they claimed they didn't have when you were pursuing them. The urgency reveals the attachment because urgency only emerges when you're at risk of losing something that matters. The thing that matters is you. The attachment to you is what's creating the urgency. They make promises and gestures they never made when they had you. Suddenly they're willing to do therapy. Suddenly they can be vulnerable. Suddenly they recognize what you needed and they're offering to provide it. The sudden willingness is attachment in crisis mode. Attachment that's threatened activates differently than attachment that feels secure. When they had you, the attachment could be hidden behind defense because you weren't going anywhere. But when you're leaving, when the attachment is threatened with permanent loss, the defense weakens enough that the attachment can generate behavior. The behavior is too late, but it's proof the attachment was there all along, just hidden behind fear that losing you is now forcing them to overcome. Why you shouldn't care that they're attached to you. Their attachment to you doesn't create obligation for you to stay or to return or to give them another chance. Attachment is their internal experience. Your needs are your reality. The gap between what they feel internally and what they can provide externally is gap you can't bridge for them. They can be attached to you while being completely incapable of being a good partner to you. The attachment doesn't develop their capacity, doesn't make them able to be vulnerable, doesn't teach them to show up consistently, doesn't heal their wounds. The attachment exists alongside the incapacity, and the incapacity is what determines whether the relationship is viable, not the attachment. You also shouldn't care because their attachment is about them, not about you. They're attached to idea of you, to what you represented, to how you made them feel. But they're not attached enough to do the work of becoming someone who can be with you. Real attachment, healthy attachment, motivates growth. Motivates becoming the kind of person who can meet the person you're attached to. But their attachment just motivates them to want you while remaining exactly as incapable as they've always been. Attachment that doesn't drive growth is just feeling, and feeling without action is not basis for relationship. You shouldn't care because you, knowing they're attached, doesn't change that they hurt you, that the relationship didn't work, that they couldn't meet your needs. Their attachment might make the hurting more complicated, their patterns more confusing, their behavior more painful to try to understand. But attachment doesn't excuse mistreatment, doesn't justify their defended distance, doesn't make acceptable their failure to show up for you. They were attached to you while treating you poorly. The attachment didn't prevent the poor treatment. So the attachment isn't redemptive, isn't proof they really loved you, isn't evidence that you should have stayed. It's just evidence that they're human enough to attach and damaged enough to destroy what they're attached to. You shouldn't care because their attachment will keep them stuck while you move forward. Let them be attached. Let them carry you as the one who got away. Let them compare everyone to you for the next decade. Let them sit with their regret about destroying relationship with person they're attached to. That's their consequence to live with. Your job isn't to relieve their consequence by staying available to their attachment. Your job is to build life with someone whose attachment translates into presence, whose feelings create actions, whose love is visible and consistent and meeting your needs instead of just existing invisibly inside them where it can't build anything real. The difference between being attached and being capable of relationship. Attachment is feeling. Capacity is skill set. The avoidant feels attached to you, feels it intensely. But feeling attached doesn't give them skills for vulnerability, for emotional regulation, for distress tolerance, for communication, for consistency. All the things partnership requires. The attachment exists without the capacity. And attachment without capacity is attachment that destroys what it's attached to, because it can't maintain what it needs. You can be intensely attached to someone while being unable to be with them. The attachment creates the wanting. The incapacity creates the failure. Both exist simultaneously in the avoidant. They want you desperately, attached to you deeply, and they're completely unable to sustain partnership with you. The wanting doesn't overcome the inability. The attachment doesn't develop the capacity. They're stuck in the gap between what they feel and what they can do. And being stuck in that gap means destroying relationships with people they're genuinely attached to. The capacity is what's built through therapy, through processing attachment wounds, through developing skills the avoidant doesn't currently have. Some avoidants do this work. Most don't. Most just stay attached while remaining incapable. Stay attached to you for years while never developing capacity to be with you or with anyone in a healthy, sustainable way. The attachment is permanent. The incapacity is also permanent unless they pursue intensive help. And permanent incapacity means permanent inability to have relationship regardless of how strong the attachment is. Why their attachment might actually make things harder for you, not easier. If they weren't attached, if they truly didn't care, you could dismiss them easily, could write them off as person who didn't value you, who wasn't worth your time, who you're better off without. Clean, simple, no ambiguity. But knowing they're attached, knowing they do care deeply underneath their defended exterior, creates confusion. Makes you wonder if you should stay. Makes you think maybe the attachment is enough. Makes you question whether you're giving up on someone who really does love you, they just can't show it properly. The knowledge of their attachment can keep you stuck hoping when you should be leaving. Because if they're attached, if they do care, maybe they'll change, maybe the attachment will motivate them to do their work. Maybe loving you will be enough to overcome their fear. The maybe keeps you waiting, keeps you giving more chances. Keeps you tolerating treatment you shouldn't tolerate because you're making decisions based on their internal attachment rather than on their external behavior. And making decisions based on what someone feels rather than on what they do is how you stay in dysfunctional relationships, long past when you should have left. Their attachment also creates guilt about leaving. If they didn't care, you could leave without guilt. But knowing they're attached, knowing leaving will hurt them, knowing they'll carry the loss creates guilt that makes leaving harder. You feel like you're abandoning someone who needs you, hurting someone who's just scared and damaged. The guilt is manipulation even when it's not intentional manipulation. Their attachment becomes weight that keeps you there, that makes you responsible for their pain, that makes leaving feel like betrayal rather than self-protection. The attachment without capacity is actually worse than no attachment, because no attachment would let you leave cleanly. But attachment without capacity keeps you trapped in hoping they'll develop capacity, in guilt about their pain when you enforce boundaries, in confusion about whether you're giving up on real love or protecting yourself from dysfunction. The attachment makes everything muddier, more painful, harder to navigate. You'd be better off if they weren't attached, because then your choice would be clear. Their attachment is what creates the agony of leaving someone who loves you but can't love you in ways that work. What their attachment looks like years later if they never do the work. Years pass and they're still checking your social media, still asking people about you, still thinking about you regularly, even though you've built entire life without them. The attachment hasn't faded, hasn't been processed. hasn't been integrated or released or moved past. You're still the person they compare others to, still the standard they measure by, still the one they regret losing. The permanence of the attachment is evidence of how stuck they are, how unable to process loss, how defended against grieving fully and moving on completely. They're also probably romanticizing what you had in ways that make the attachment worse over time rather than better. The actual relationship, with all its problems and their inability to meet you, has been replaced in their memory with idealized version. The idealized version is perfect relationship they could have had if only they'd been different. They're attached to the perfect version, and perfect version is impossible to get over because it was never real. The attachment to fantasy of you and them is attachment that can last forever, because fantasy never disappoints, never requires work, never confronts them with their actual limitations. The attachment years later also includes bitterness alongside the longing. They're attached to you and they resent you for mattering this much, for affecting them this deeply, for being person they can't forget or replace. The bitterness is their defended state trying to protect them from the vulnerability of still caring about you after all this time. But bitterness mixed with attachment is a toxic combination that keeps them even more stuck. They can't let you go because they're attached. They can't move toward you because they're bitter about the attachment, so they stay frozen in the middle, attached and bitter, carrying you as permanent unfulfilled longing that poisons their capacity to attach to anyone else. The final truth about attachment without capacity: the avoidant is attached to you. The attachment is real, deep, probably permanent, unless they do serious therapeutic work. And none of it matters if the attachment doesn't translate into capacity to be with you. Attachment that can't create relationship is just internal experience they're having that doesn't affect your life, doesn't meet your needs, doesn't build anything real. They can be attached and you can still be right to leave. They can care deeply and you can still require someone who can show they care through consistent, present, vulnerable engagement. Their attachment is their problem to manage, not your problem to accommodate. Not your responsibility to stay because somewhere underneath their defended exterior they need you desperately. Need without capacity to meet need is need that creates dysfunction, creates pain, creates relationships that hurt more than they help. You deserve someone whose need for you drives them to become someone who can be with you, someone whose attachment motivates growth, rather than just creating internal suffering they hide from you while treating you poorly. The truth is also that you can't love someone into capacity, can't care about them enough to make them able to care about you properly, can't attach to them strongly enough that your attachment compensates for their inability to attach in healthy ways. The relationship requires both people capable. One person attached and capable, other person attached and incapable is not formula for partnership. It's formula for the capable person depleting themselves, trying to maintain what the incapable person can't maintain, while the incapable person stays attached but stuck, wanting what they're destroying through their inability to do what wanting should motivate them to do. They can fake love, can say the words, make the gestures, perform the script, but they can't fake the attachment. The attachment is there, undeniable, probably permanent. And you shouldn't care because attachment without capacity is not enough, is not basis for staying, is not reason to accept less than you need, is not evidence that the relationship could work if you just tried harder or understood better or gave more chances. The attachment is real, the incapacity is also real, and the incapacity is what determines whether a relationship is viable. They're attached to you. Let them stay attached. Let them carry you for years. Let them regret losing you forever. That's consequence of attachment without capacity. That's what happens when you're attached to someone but too defended to do what attachment should motivate you to do, which is become someone worthy of the person you're attached to, someone capable of meeting them. Someone who can translate internal feeling into external action that creates actual partnership instead of just internal suffering that proves attachment exists, while proving attachment alone is never enough. The specific moments when their attachment becomes unbearable for them. Late at night when defenses are down and the truth surfaces in ways they can suppress during waking hours. 3 a.m, and they're wide awake thinking about you. Not romanticized version, not idealized memory. Just you. The actual you they lost. The attachment at 3 a.m. is pure, undefended, undeniable. During daylight, they can convince themselves they're over it, they've moved on, you weren't that important. But at 3 a.m., the lies don't work. They're attached, desperately. And the attachment is creating physical ache they can't relieve, because you're not there and you're not coming back, and they destroyed their access to the only person who could relieve the ache the attachment creates. The attachment becomes unbearable when they see you happy without them, running into you somewhere and you're laughing. You're light. You're clearly fine in ways you weren't fine toward the end when their treatment was crushing you. Seeing you better without them activates the attachment, mixed with devastating recognition that they were hurting you, that removing them from your life was upgrade for you, that their attachment to you didn't prevent them from being bad for you. The combination of still being attached while seeing evidence that you're better without them is pain that's almost physical. Attachment usually believes it's beneficial to the person you're attached to, but seeing you happier without them destroys that belief. They're attached to someone who's better off without them. And that's truth that makes the attachment unbearable. The unbearable moment comes when they hear you're in serious relationship with someone else. Not just dating, serious, committed, building future with someone who isn't them. The news creates crisis in their attachment system. While you were single, while you were available in theory even if not in practice, the attachment could hold on to hope. Hope that someday they'd get their shit together. Hope that timing would align. Hope that you'd give them another chance. But you being serious with someone else kills the hope. Makes the attachment futile. They're attached to someone who's chosen someone else, who's building life that doesn't include them, who's moved on so completely that their attachment is irrelevant to your actual life. The futility of attachment to someone who's unavailable and uninterested is what makes it unbearable. Their attachment becomes unbearable during milestones or holidays or moments of crisis when they want to reach out and can't. Something happens in their life, good or bad, and their first impulse is to tell you, to share it with you, to have you be part of the moment. But they can't reach out. You're not available. The relationship that would make reaching out appropriate doesn't exist anymore. So they sit with the impulse to connect, with the attachment driving them to reach for you, with the reality that they can't reach for you because they destroyed their access. The gap between the wanting to share and the inability to share is where the attachment becomes unbearable. They're attached to someone they can't access, and that's torture they created for themselves through their patterns. How their attachment without your presence is changing their psychology. The unreciprocated attachment is teaching them that they're capable of needing people in ways they've always denied. Their identity built on not needing anyone is crumbling under weight of how much they need you, how much they want you, how much your absence affects them. The attachment is forcing them to confront that they're not the independent, self-sufficient person they've claimed to be. They're someone who attaches, who needs, who depends on others for their emotional well-being. The confrontation with their own need is destroying the identity they built their entire life on. And watching their identity crumble is either going to drive them to therapy to build new identity based on accepting their capacity for attachment, or it's going to drive them to rebuild their defenses even higher to prevent ever feeling this attached again. Their attachment to you without ability to be with you is also teaching them that they can survive pain they thought would destroy them. They thought if they ever needed someone this much and lost them, they wouldn't survive it. But they're surviving it. The survival is teaching them that their fear of attachment wasn't accurate. Attachment doesn't destroy them. Losing attachment hurts, but doesn't kill them. The learning could be transformative if they use it as evidence that they can risk attachment again, can let someone matter again, can be vulnerable again, because even if it ends, they'll survive. But most will learn different lessons. They'll learn that surviving attachment loss is painful enough that they never want to experience it again. So they need to defend even more thoroughly against future attachment. The attachment is also creating shame spiral that's affecting their self-concept. They're ashamed that they're still attached to you, ashamed that they can't move on, ashamed that someone who left them, who decided they weren't worth staying for, still occupies this much mental space. The shame is making them hate themselves for being weak enough to still care, still want, still be affected by someone who's clearly over them. The self-hatred from the shame is making them either more defended or more self-destructive. More defended. If they hate themselves for being attached, they'll defend harder against feeling anything for anyone. More self-destructive. If they hate themselves for their patterns, they'll engage in behaviors that confirm they're worthless, that they deserve to be alone, that they're fundamentally broken. Their unprocessed attachment is also preventing them from being present in their actual life. They're stuck in past with you, mentally replaying what happened, imagining what could have been, obsessing over their mistakes, living in the attachment instead of living in their present. The stuckness is making them unable to engage with opportunities, relationships, experiences that are available to them now. They're missing their life because they're too attached to past relationship to be present for current reality. And missing their life is creating more regret, more shame, more pain that reinforces the attachment because the attachment is now mixed with grief about all the life they're missing while being stuck on you. Why their attachment actually prevents them from changing. You'd think attachment this painful would motivate them to change, to do the work, to become someone who could handle attachment without destroying it. But for most avoidants, the attachment prevents change rather than motivating it. The attachment is so painful that they defend against the pain instead of using the pain as motivation. Defending against pain means defending against the feelings, the vulnerability, the openness that therapy requires. Can't do therapeutic work when you're defended against feeling. And the attachment pain is making them defend harder, not softer. The attachment also gives them excuse for why new relationships don't work. They're not failing at new relationships because of their patterns. They're failing because they're still hung up on you. The excuse prevents them from facing that their patterns are the problem. Prevents them from recognizing they need to change. As long as they can blame their relational failures on still being attached to you, they don't have to face that the attachment to you isn't the problem. Their capacity is the problem. And capacity doesn't change without therapeutic work they're not doing. Their attachment to you is also satisfying their need for connection in ways that prevent them from pursuing real connection. They have relationship with you in their head. Imaginary relationship where they think about you, fantasize about you, maintain connection to idea of you. The imaginary relationship is meeting some of their attachment needs. Not all of them, but enough that the pain of being alone isn't severe enough to override their fear of real connection. If they were completely alone, if they didn't have imaginary relationship with you in their head, the loneliness might drive them to overcome their fear and pursue real connection. But they have you, imaginary you, and imaginary you is safe in ways real people aren't safe. So they stay attached to imaginary you instead of doing the work to be with real person. The ways their attachment harms the people who come after you. New people who try to date the avoidant are competing with ghost of you, idealized version they carry, standard they measure everyone against. And competing with ghost is unwinnable competition. Ghost doesn't have flaws. Ghost doesn't make mistakes. Ghost doesn't trigger their defenses because ghost isn't real enough to create real intimacy that would trigger real fear. New people are real, have flaws, make mistakes, trigger the avoidance defenses. So new people lose the comparison before they even start. The avoidance attachment to you is ruining their chances with anyone new. New people also suffer from the avoidant being emotionally unavailable in specific way that's tied to still being attached to you. Part of the avoidant's heart is occupied by you, by attachment to you, by grief over losing you, by regret about how they treated you. New people don't get whole person. They get whatever portion isn't still tied up in unresolved attachment to you. And getting partial person whose emotional energy is split between present relationship and past attachment, is getting someone who can't fully show up. The new person is being harmed by the avoidant's inability to let you go. The avoidant is also more defended with new people specifically because they're still attached to you. They learned from you that attachment leads to pain. So they're protecting themselves from experiencing that pain again by refusing to attach to new people as deeply. More defended means more distant. More distant means new people feel the walls, feel the unavailability, feel like they're being held at arm's length. The holding at distance is direct result of attachment to you, teaching them to never let anyone that close again. New people are paying price for the pain of the attachment to you, even though they weren't part of creating that pain. What would have to happen for their attachment to become healthy love? For the attachment to transform into something healthy, something that could create relationship, they'd have to do years of intensive therapy. Therapy that processes their attachment wounds from childhood, therapy that develops their capacity for vulnerability, therapy that teaches them emotional regulation skills they don't have, therapy that helps them understand their patterns and choose different responses. Years, not weeks, not months. Years of consistent therapeutic work that's uncomfortable and expensive and requires commitment most avoidants never make. They'd also have to grieve you, fully, completely, not the defended version where they tell themselves they're over it while still being attached. Real grieving where they feel the full weight of the loss, process the pain, integrate the experience, and come out the other side having let go. Grieving requires vulnerability the avoidant doesn't access easily. Requires feeling deeply the thing they've defended against feeling. Requires moving through pain instead of around it. Most avoidants can't do this, so the attachment stays ungrieved, unprocessed, unintegrated. And ungrieved attachment is attachment that doesn't transform, just continues indefinitely. For the attachment to become healthy, they'd have to let you go completely, not just behaviorally by not contacting you, psychologically. Stop thinking about you, stop comparing others to you, stop carrying you as standard, or as regret, or as the one who got away. Release you from the space you occupy in their mind and heart. Make peace with the loss. Accept that you're gone and not coming back. Move forward into future that doesn't include you even in imagination. The letting go is necessary for them to be available to someone new. But letting go requires accepting the loss as permanent. And accepting permanent loss of someone they're attached to is pain most avoidants avoid by just staying attached indefinitely. They'd also have to become someone different, not just understand their patterns better, actually be a different person with different capacity. Someone who can be vulnerable without terror. Someone who can be consistent without it feeling like prison. Someone who can be emotionally available without it triggering their fear of being consumed. Becoming a different person requires not just therapy but practice. Trying new behaviors. Tolerating discomfort of being different. Sustaining the new behaviors long enough they become natural instead of performed. The transformation is possible, but it's rare because it's hard, and most avoidants choose familiar discomfort of staying the same over unfamiliar discomfort of changing. Why you hoping they'll change is different from them actually changing. You might hope that their attachment to you is strong enough to motivate change. Hope that pain of losing you drives them to therapy. Hope that years from now they'll have done the work and become someone who could be a good partner. The hope is understandable. You cared about them. Part of you wants them to heal, wants them to become capable of love they couldn't access with you, wants their story to have redemptive arc where losing you becomes catalyst that saves them. But your hope for their change doesn't create their change. Your wanting them to heal doesn't make them pursue healing. Your belief in their potential doesn't develop their capacity. They have to want to change for themselves, have to pursue help for themselves, have to do the work because they can't tolerate staying the same, not because you hope they'll be different. Your hope is kind, but it's irrelevant to their actual process. If they change, it'll be because pain of their patterns became unbearable enough to overcome their fear of vulnerability that therapy requires. Not because you hoped they would. Your hope can also keep you stuck waiting when you should be moving forward. Hoping they'll change can prevent you from fully investing in new relationships. Can keep part of you oriented toward them, toward possibility of them becoming someone who could be with you. Can prevent you from completely closing that door and building life that doesn't include even the possibility of them. The hope needs to be released, not because they don't deserve hope, but because your hope for them is costing you your full presence in your own life. Hope for them if you must. But don't wait for them. Don't organize your life around possibility they'll transform. They might never change, and even if they do change, the change will come too late for you. The ultimate truth about attachment without you. Their attachment to you is real, deep, probably permanent. And it exists entirely without you, without your participation, without affecting your life, unless you let it affect your life. The attachment is their internal experience that you're not responsible for, not required to reciprocate, not obligated to accommodate. They're attached. That's their reality. You're moved on. That's your reality. Both can be true without creating obligation for you to manage their attachment or make it easier or be available to it. The attachment also doesn't redeem their behavior, doesn't excuse how they treated you, doesn't mean they really loved you in ways that matter. They were attached and they hurt you. Both are true. The attachment doesn't cancel out the hurt, doesn't make the relationship something worth returning to, doesn't prove that connection was there underneath the defended behavior. Connection was there. Hurt was there. The hurt is what matters more, because hurt is what you experienced. Attachment is what they experienced. And their internal experience doesn't determine your response to their external behavior. They can fake love, but not attachment. The attachment is real, and the attachment being real changes nothing about you being right to leave, right to stay gone, right to build life with someone whose attachment translates into presence instead of into defended distance. That destroys what the attachment needs. Their attachment is evidence of their humanity. Their inability to act on the attachment is evidence of their damage. Both exist in them simultaneously. You get to decide that the damage matters more than the attachment when determining whether to stay in someone's life. They're attached to you. You deserve someone whose attachment creates safety rather than anxiety, whose need for you drives growth rather than defense, whose love is visible and consistent rather than invisible and maintained through suffering and silence. Their attachment is theirs to manage. Your freedom is yours to maintain. Let them be attached. You keep living.